By the end of 2026, the United States has made promises to spend over $1 trillion in defense spending. And this is the first time in history the budget has been so high. And last week, the Pentagon proposed a budget for 2027. The number, $1.5 trillion, a 42% increase. That's the largest defense budget request since World War II. That increase alone, $445 billion added in a single year, it approaches the combined defense budgets of China, Russia, and the United Kingdom. And the point of this video is not about whether that spending is justified. You guys are gonna have to figure that out on your own. The point of this video is what happens when war spending is pulling all the resources away from the natural economy. Because remember, we still need to build more homes, we still need to upgrade the electrical grid, we have to expand infrastructure, and we have to construct all these data centers that are supposed to power the AI revolution. Because remember, at the end of the day, all of those things, they require the same things. They require the same workers, the same materials, and the same factory capacity. And there's not enough of everything to go around. To understand how fast this is happening, you have to look at the trajectory. Just a few years ago, defense spending was under $850 billion. Now it's crossed $1 trillion. And if the next proposal goes through, it jumps to $1.5 trillion. That's not normal growth, it's acceleration. And it all started in 2025 with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which injected over $150 billion directly into defense production, targeting ships, weapon systems, and supply chains. Then, in 2026, active conflict with Iran pushed demand even further, with munitions being consumed in real time at rates that the current industrial base wasn't designed to sustain. Now, the Pentagon is considering adding another massive increase, another $80 or $100 billion, just to replenish what's already been used. And you can already see the effects on the ground, because production lines are being pushed to scale faster than they ever meant to, and this isn't steady peacetime spending, it's rapid industrial ramp up. Now, if we look at where this money is going, more than half of the proposed 2027 budget, over $750 billion, is just going towards procurement. That's not research or bureaucracy, that's buying things like ships, aircrafts, missiles, drones, and the factories needed to produce them. And you could see the scale of that demand everywhere. The Navy is ordering 41 new ships, the Air Force is accelerating production of the B-21 stealth bomber with $4.5 billion in funding. And investment in autonomous systems, basically drones and battlefield logistics, is reaching record levels. Even the Space Force budget is doubling from $32 billion to $71 billion. At the same time, the military is expanding its workforce and it's raising pay to attract more people into service. On the private side, companies like Lockheed Martin, RTX Corporation, General Dynamics, and Northrop Grumman, they already have backlogs stretching years into the future. And they're passing rising labor and supply chain costs directly back to the Pentagon. Investors are starting to notice too, because capital is flowing into defense like it's the next major growth sector. And this isn't some abstract government spending, it's real physical production. It's factories running longer, it's materials being consumed, and its capacity being pushed to its limits. And every unit of that production, it requires something. Even to build all of these things, you're gonna need more welders, more machinists, more electricians, more engineers, and it's gonna require materials, things like steel, aluminum, copper, and semiconductors, along with factories and supply chains to put everything together. But all of those things are not unique to defense. They're the exact same inputs the rest of the economy depends on. The same welders building submarines are the ones needed to build housing. The same electricians wiring missile systems are the ones wiring data centers. The same steel going into a destroyer is the steel needed for infrastructure. And those resources are not unlimited. They were already stretched before this buildup began. Now, they're being pulled into defense production at an even bigger scale. Now, you might be thinking, If the private sector offers someone a job, or the government or a defense company offers someone a job, what's the incentive to work with the government or the defense company? Well, the thing is, defense has a structural advantage in that competition because government contracts are long term and they're guaranteed, and they have cost plus pricing. And that allows contractors to pass rising costs directly back to the Pentagon. So they're able to bid up wages, and they're backed pretty much by the finance of the government. And all of this pulls workers away from the private sector. And companies that need those same workers are forced to compete, but they don't have the same financial security behind them as the US government. So the economy isn't expanding to meet all of this demand at once. Demand is competing for the same constrained supply. And the sector with the deepest pockets and the least price sensitivity is the one that wins. One of the biggest side effects when defense spending gets too big, and something which people rarely talk about, is it tends to drive inflation higher, but not the kind of inflation that most people think about. This isn't driven by consumer spending or by the Federal Reserve printing too much money. It's something called cost push inflation. And basically, it's driven by real physical constraints on labor and materials. When defense contractors raise wages to attract skilled workers, other industries have to match those wages or lose them. And when materials get pulled into military production, there's less availability for everything else, and prices rise. When factory capacity is tied up in long-term defense contracts, commercial production gets pushed back, and costs increase. The pressure doesn't stay contained. It spreads outward into housing, infrastructure, energy, and eventually consumer goods. Not because there's too much money in the system, but because too many parts of the economy are competing for the same limited resources, and it drives up prices. What higher defense spending does is it also shifts the economy because businesses are prioritizing defense contracts over anything else because the revenue is more stable, the demand is guaranteed, and the growth is clearer than in most civilian sectors. Supply chains that once served construction or manufacturing are being pulled into defense production, and both capital and labor are following that movement. The economy isn't consciously deciding to reorganize around defense, it's just responding to incentives. When one sector offers the most stable contracts and the least uncertainty, resources naturally start to move towards it. And that shift doesn't happen all at once. It happens gradually, contract by contract, worker by worker, until the center of gravity of the economy begins to change. Former President Dwight Eisenhower understood this better than anyone. In 1953, 8 years before his famous farewell warning about the military-industrial complex, he gave what became known as the Cross of Iron speech. Basically, he laid out the opportunity cost with a great speech I want to read for you guys. Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired, signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. The cost of one modern heavy bomber is a modern brick school in more than 30 cities. We pay for a single destroyer with new homes that could have housed more than 8,000 people. And the point of this speech is that he wasn't arguing against defense spending in his speech. He was a 5-star general. He was arguing that it has a cost that extends beyond the budget line, a cost measured in the things that don't get built because the resources went somewhere else. Now, historically, the United States has done this before. During World War II, defense spending rose from 1.4% of GDP to 37%. And over half the manufacturing workforce was producing military equipment by 1944. The economy during that time didn't just support the war, it became the war. And during the Cold War, the buildup was slower, but it lasted decades. The total cost of the Cold War, adjusted for inflation, was around $13 trillion over 44 years. And even though it did cost a lot, it did drive major innovations, and it produced the internet, GPS, and the semiconductor industry. It also produced massive federal debt, deferred infrastructure maintenance, and an education system that fell behind international peers. But both of those periods had something the current moment doesn't: slack. In the early 1940s, unemployment was 14.5%. So there was a large pool of unemployed workers ready to be absorbed. And during the Cold War, the buildup happened gradually, giving the economy time to adjust. Today, the situation is very different. Unemployment is a lot lower. Key industries are already short workers, and the buildup is happening quickly. There's no excess capacity to absorb it. That means that every additional unit of defense production has to be pulled from somewhere else. None of this means defense spending is inherently bad. At the end of the day, you have to defend your country, and it does create high-paying jobs. It also drives technological innovation, and it builds industrial capacity that can benefit the broader economy and everyday Americans. That's always been part of the story. The point isn't that the spending is harmful, it's that it comes with trade-offs. And at this scale, at this speed, in an economy that already has limited labor and limited capacity, those trade-offs become large enough to reshape the economy rather than simply support it.